Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Recording this video very late at night because transfer deadline day is done. I've just finished work. It is, what is it? It's almost 1:15 in the morning. This video, I'm not going to set it until probably going out in the morning at some point, but I wanted to record it because don't have a lot of time tomorrow, quite frankly, and I've got to head off to Newcastle. You'll find that my voice, unfortunately, is probably going to be a little bit lower, a little bit quieter, and I apologise for that. Anyone that can't hear it as clearly, but quite frankly, everyone's asleep in the house. It's only me awake, so I thought this was my best chance to try and get the video done. So it's kind of going to be a bit of a weird, hushed, in the night time kind of talk, even though you're not going to be watching this until the morning. So sorry, it's a bit weird. But yeah, the transfer window is done. It is shut. I'm not going to say it's slammed shut because that's always a bit weird, but it has closed. We'll all have our opinions on Tottenham Hotspur's work and what they've done in it, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's ugly, or whether it's somewhere in the middle. I've had loads of people asking me, like, what do you make of the window? What would you rate it out of 10? Seems to be one of the ways that people kind of do these things. And I think this time more than ever, I'm going to revert to a slightly different answer, and it's I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And the reason I say that is because I've had so many transfer windows in the past where I've kind of been quite excited about it, and I've been like, oh, this is amazing, what a brilliant transfer window, blah blah blah, and they've gone on to be absolute horror shows. And tonight's kind of activities, especially the last transfer of the day, really made me think of that more than anything, and how, transfer windows is this really strange beast that they can only really be judged properly with hindsight. And this one feels like it's going to be absolutely no different to that whatsoever. The reason I talk about that, of course, is Giovanni Lo Celso, who is no longer a Tottenham Hotspur player. And it made me think of 2019, that summer, that strange summer. Spurs spent around about £150 million on these 4 new players. It seemed quite exciting at the time. I remember being very excited about certainly some of them, most of them, to be fair. Jack Clarke was probably the one that we weren't too sure about because he was, very young and unproven and had barely played even many games for Leeds at that point. I just wonder now if I could get a DeLorean that could get it up to 88 miles an hour, take it back all of those years, was it half a decade? I'd probably do a bit of a Martin McFly, Doc Brown moment. I would hand a letter to Mauricio Pochettino and just say, see this long letter, probably like a scroll. Just don't do all of the things on this list. Don't sign that player. Don't sign that player. Don't do this. Whatever you do, don't say that or do that. I wonder whether whether it would have affected the future. It must have done, surely, or whether fates would have conspired to be exactly the same Tottenham Hotspur we've ended up with. I would just tell him, Tanguy Gio, Ryan Sessegnon and Jack Clarke are probably not going to be the game changers you might hope they're going to be. It's just so weird when you look back on these windows. I mean, with Lo Celso's departure, which I understand is going to bring in Spurs €10 million, which is about £8.4 million, plus add-ons, plus a sell-on clause. And we also have this option that's been reported for Betis's USA international, Johnny Cardoso, which is a great name. I think he just goes by Johnny. I think that's on his back of his shirt. He has that. That's a strange one within itself, and that's probably for another video to really get into, because it's something that's a bit more commonplace in Europe and in South America, but not something we really see in the Premier League that you would get. It's almost like a first option deal, but seemingly with also a set lower price for the player. I've seen some reports of around £25 million that if Spurs wanted to sign him. But if they didn't, that becomes a sell-on clause for a player they do not have or own. It's very, very strange. It all makes this deal for Lo Celso a bit better, and it also shows you just how desperate, I think, or financially struggling, I think a lot of clubs in Europe are. They have so much kind of fewer euros to spread around than maybe Premier League clubs do. But that's one, I think, for probably another video rather than me at 1 in the morning trying to get my head around all of these things. But when you think about it, that £150 million outlay in 2019, don't even forget the huge amount of wages. It's only definitely two of those players would have brought over the years to Spurs. Essentially, 5 years on, they've made £12 million out of those players. Just incredible when you look at it. That includes like a 25% sell-on clause for Jack Clark, who went to Ipswich for, I think it was £15 million. Yeah, it's just mad. So all of them have now gone. And actually, there's an interesting little fact that every single one of those 4 players went back to their former clubs, either on loan or permanently. Just shows you the kind of deals that were done. But it's not just 2019. That's the point I'm trying to make here is if you want to fast forward to the next summer, 2020, essentially Sergio Reguilón and Alfie Devine, who have not yet left Spurs, they're the only 2 players left from that window. It's just mad. And that was an exciting window. That was the return of Gareth Bale. We finally got the return of Gareth Bale. Yet that window has proved to be completely just didn't create a long-lasting legacy whatsoever. You could probably argue that Højbjerg probably stuck around more than most on Reguilón and Devine. Reguilón, just nothing really to talk about in terms of getting anywhere with him. The difficulty, again, as I've said in the past, is it had to be a permanent deal, not a loan one, because he's in the final 12 months of his contract. And I think his wages are quite high as well. So it's going to put off like Brentford. I don't think really ever thought that they could kind of take him on after his loan. There are other transfer windows open though. There are still some across Europe. I think the Netherlands, I think Portugal, I think Turkey. There are more opportunities. And for Alfie's a bit of a different situation. Alfie Devine, very strange one in a way, that everyone kind of outside the club anticipated that he was going to head off on loan this summer. But from what I'm told, various clubs, he had a lot of clubs interested in him. A lot of clubs went to Spurs and were kind of told, no, he's going to stick around this season. And then only late in this month, it was decided, no, actually he can go on loan. And by the time, obviously, that's happened, a lot of those clubs have then moved on to other targets, kind of leaving Alfie a little bit stuffed, I think. There were still clubs interesting today, but for one reason or another, it just didn't materialise. I know Parma in Italy were looking at him. I think Swansea were one of the clubs. I think Blackburn were looking at him, but just nothing happened. There is a chance, of course, that I think Spurs weren't too keen on there being a loan abroad, but now they're kind of in a situation with if they want him to go out, they're going to have to. Could be a Netherlands loan. That did very well for Troy Parrott if there's a good club there. Portugal, of course, could be a good one too, but we'll see. We'll see what the next couple of days brings for him. Selfishly, if he sticks around, I think he'd be a good option to have around the squad for the Europa League games and the Carabao Cup games and things like that. And then in January, try and get him a decent loan move. But I think for him, taking it away from my selfish needs, he probably needs a regular season of football, I think, very much so. With Reguilón, I've seen a lot of people saying keep him around for the left-back slot. A, I don't think he particularly fits the Postecoglou inverted fullback system. And B, Postecoglou's looked at him a couple of times and just gone, nah, you're all right. And we're going to come to that. That's a very key factor in all of this. Regardless of what we want, what we kind of deem is important or necessary for Spurs, ultimately Postecoglou is a very strong-willed, set, focused guy on what he wants. And that's what all these windows are about. So we've done 2019, we've done 2020. I don't know why I'm not calling it 2019 and 2020. Only 2 signings remain from the 2021 window. Romero and Pat Matasar, who technically obviously came a season later. You could argue you've got Brian Hill still, but he is out on loan in Girona and clearly doesn't have a future at Spurs. So even 2022, I kept going. Destiny Udogie was signed, didn't arrive, of course, till the next. Sorry, Sarr did come the next. So yeah, and Udogie then came the next window as well, next summer. He's really the only success you could definitely say from the 2022 window, because I was looking at that. Richarlison, Basuma and Spence are still there. Jury's probably still out on all 3 of them as well. So this is what I mean about, I'm now starting to get really wary of looking at a window and going, yeah, you sorted that, fantastic. Because ultimately, they all proved to be a little bit naff. They did. And to be perfectly kind of honest, I think with precious hindsight that we have, I'd say Spurs recruitment on the whole in the past half a decade, until probably Postecoglou arrived in 2023, been pretty woeful. I think it's been pretty awful. And I think that's mainly because it's every year you're getting completely different types of players coming in for completely different types of managers. And you're ending up with this weird Frankenstein's monster of a squad that's just not fit for purpose for the next manager coming in. And that's really what Postecoglou's had to do since he's coming in. He's had to, just fix it all and just completely create a squad in his own image. Look, don't forget, he is the first manager since 2019 to get the luxury of having a second summer transfer window. How stupid is that? How ridiculous is that he is the first manager in half a decade to get a second summer transfer window to work in? That is the crazy turnover at the club in managers. I think it not only shows what a mess the club has been in, but also hopefully we'll finally get to see what a second summer transfer, 3 transfer windows in all, that it does to a squad, and whether actually it becomes fit for purpose suddenly. Look, this summer's exploits in the transfer market can be picked apart completely. I've seen a lot of good arguments for either side. I've seen people criticising it, and I think a lot of what they're saying is quite right. And I also have seen people backing it, and a lot of what they're saying is quite right. But the truth is, we've got no idea. We just don't. We won't know whether it's been a good transfer window probably until a couple of months in, maybe even at the end of the season, because we haven't really been able to see any impact, positive or negative yet. There was a decent outlay in it. Obviously, the kind of the net spend will be different, but they've put out around 140 million, I'd say, if you're including add-ons and things like that as well. I wouldn't say that's a huge outlay in today's market. A decent one is enough. I wouldn't say it's huge, but when you've got some clubs just throwing silly money around. They have signed a big striker, Dominic Solanke, who I still think is going to be a brilliant fit. I think he could end up being one of the signings of the summer. Weirdly, I've seen a few kind of big pundits like Ian Wright say that as well, even with his Arsenal connections. And of course, Timo Werner and Solanke. This is one of the things I'm saying about the window, is that Werner and Solanke, 26 and 28 and 26, the other way around, they're the only kind of players that aren't teenagers that have been signed. And I absolutely could understand why people would look at that, and that could be a criticism. Absolutely. You could say that they've looked for, I don't say cheaper versions, because Archie Gray was £40 million kind of package. Odebear was like £30 million all in as well. So we're not saying cheaper options, but they've gone for the younger options with the resale value, which can be as classic Tottenham profile signing. So I can understand criticism there. And personally, I would have liked to see a little bit more experience in there, absolutely, and it would have probably hastened the process of what Postecoglou likes to do in a second season. There's also some holes remaining in the squad, absolutely. I asked Postecoglou about one of them that I felt is there, and that's, in my mind, they've gone from last summer, well, technically September, when Davinson Sanchez left, they had 3 centre-backs. They were left with in Eric Dyer, Romero and Van der Ven. I feel like they're kind of in the position where they've just swapped Dyer for Dragishin for Dyer. Admittedly, a different kind of defender, fits the system better, but still just 3 natural centre-backs. And then you've got people having to fill in, like Ben Davies and Archie Gray, whereas last year it was Ben Davies and Emerson Royal. So I personally don't feel that's moved on. Ange gave me a very decent answer to that question, which I'm going to come out with in a little bit. But yeah, I kind of feel like that's one area. You could also argue that Ben Davies also isn't a natural left back for the system, the inverted left back. So you could say that, yeah, left back is a position that maybe still needs to be fixed, but maybe that's all kind of part of the contract thing with Ben Davies being in his last year and what happens with him. So there's that element as well. There's loads and loads of ways to look at it. I think I do also, and I hate to use this one because people are roll their eyes a little bit, but there was the homegrown foreign player element. I do think, maybe the club not turned a blind eye to that, but has spent so many years kind of neglecting it. I guess it is turning a blind eye to it, neglecting it, that they were now in a situation where they kind of had to have a summer where they brought in a lot of young players that could replenish that, because a lot of those players, unless I'm mistaken, they're going to be eligible to be club trained players in 2 years' time. So that will change that whole dynamic and fix that thing going forward as well. And I do think it did hamstrung them. Sorry to say anything about hamstrings, but I do feel like as it got towards the end of the window, they were probably thinking, we're just going to have to leave more people out. I'm not saying that absolutely decided things. I think if there was a great deal and they could absolutely do it for a player that Postecoglou wanted, I still think they would have done it and just dealt with the consequences. But it is going to be in the back of the mind that then maybe there is no point just getting someone or anyone to fill a gap, because it's just going to cause more problems. Because, September 3rd is the deadline for that. I think with the way it's played out, it's going to be one player they're going to have to leave out of the Europa League squad, which I would imagine is probably going to have to be someone like Fraser Forster. And then you give him Carabao Cup games and you give Brandon Austin the Europa League games, perhaps. Maybe that's the way around that. I don't know. It could be a surprise. It could be someone completely different. But yeah, maybe that will play a part as well. But yeah, in Postecoglou's eyes, which I guess is the key thing, he feels that this squad now is far closer to what he wants it to be. For me, the biggest thing I can say about it is it finally shows some joined up thinking. I can see a lot of logic to the players, and I can see a squad that actually fits what Postecoglou wants. Amount of people in the past, we've seen Mourinho with kind of, players that didn't really fit him. We've seen Conte kind of trying to use players that didn't really fit what he wanted. And we've seen, probably the last joined up thinking, I guess, was Pochettino until that 2019 one where it all went wrong. Let's put it that way. That's the best way to put it. And I think the other thing about this squad is it does feel like one that's being built for sustained success. Yes, these young players fit the Postecoglou system, but they're also so talented that they'll fit anything going forward. They're not, it's weird to say they're specific players, but they're not pigeonholed players. If you understand what I mean, it's a bit of a weird way of explaining it. It just feels like a squad that's built for sustained success, kind of building a bit of a, I don't want to say dynasty or legacy because we're far too early into that, but it's there that they're kind of building something. That's the main thing, rather than chucking things together and essentially putting your finger in a hole in the dam to stop the water breaking through. They're actually building foundations for a proper dam. I don't know where I'm going with that analogy. So Postecoglou was asked today at his press conference if he's happy with his squad. And he said, I'm very happy. We've done a hell of a lot of work in 12 months, 3 windows. No doubts the squad's changed, the demographic of the squad has changed, the suitability to the football I want to play, we're much better equipped for that. There's growth in the team, absolutely. We needed to do some fairly major work 12 months ago, and since then we've gone a long way to getting the team to where we want to. There's still more work to be done. It was never going to happen quickly. I don't think it should happen quickly. When it does happen quickly, you're more fraught to getting it wrong. So I think we're in a good place. The players we've brought in are really making a short-term impact, and even in the longer term, I think they're going to be really good contributors for us. I certainly think we've got a more well-rounded squad to deal with Europe, the extra games, and whatever injuries we have. So yeah, I think it's been a real positive window. I think we've just about gone to the maximum in terms of turnover without it affecting competitiveness. Because obviously we finished 5th last year, which was a decent outcome for us in terms of where we were. But you don't want to be doing this and finishing 8th or 10th or falling off the top half of the table. It's always about balancing act. But like I said, I feel we've done the maximum we could without it disrupting our competitiveness. It's not finished by any stretch, but I'm happy that we've stuck to the plan in terms of discipline of just bringing players who we think can contribute short-term, long-term, but also synergy with the football we want to play, and not getting too caught up in being in any rush to fast-track a process. But, because this is the other thing, surely there must be some risk attached with such a huge turnover of the squad. I mean, the players that have left now, Lo Celso, Skip, Emerson, Roden, Dyer, Sessegnon, Ndembele, Højbjerg, Perisic, Tanganga, Parrott, Hill, Velise, Ashley Phillips has gone out on loan, Manor Solomon's gone out on loan, Dane Scarlett's all gone on loan, Reguilon Divine could yet head out the door. So yeah, he was asked, is there not a risk in that much going on at a club? And he said, yeah, there is, but there's risk in everything. There's no sure path in any which way you go. All I've got to rely on is my knowledge and my history in the game, that wherever I've been and wherever I've been, I've had to overhaul squads. There's a process I go through, which for the most part works. That's what I've got to rely on. In terms of that, I'm not just saying, well, let's just get rid of 10 players and bring in 10 players. It's a bit more, hopefully, methodical. Why cannot do? It's because it's very early in the morning. Methodical than that, so that we try and get as many right as we can. You're never going to get them all right. I think that's the other fallacy about transfers, that you've got to have 100% hit rate. That's impossible, because if you're bringing in every player and they're great, there's only 11 positions in the time. So there's always going to be guys who are going to miss out. If you've got a really good transfer policy, it probably means that's about 70 or 80%. There's always going to be a 20 or 30% attrition rate, just because you've got everyone right. That's the measurements I want to work with. While there is risk, I think you can mitigate risk with that process. And he was also asked, of course, one of the criticisms that we spoke about earlier, the youthful nature of the signings, the fact that 4 of them are teenagers, and only 2, obviously, we're including Yang there, who's going to come in January. And so he was asked about that, because let's be honest, it is a very, as I said, a classic Tottenham profile of a signing. Sign a young player who increases in value, and then if you have to sell him, you make a lovely profit. But Postecoglou was very clear, and to be fair, this is something that we've heard over in the past, and he's said in the past that young players he often finds are a little more mouldable and adaptable to his beliefs and his methods. And he was very clear today that, first off, he was asked, how do you feel you've been backed in this summer transfer window? To which he went, yeah, like that. He said it twice. Then he made it very clear that he drove the process for the younger players. He said it was definitely part of my plan, because I think when you're trying to build or rebuild a team, you've got to look. All managers hope that they're for the long term, but the reality is you don't know how long you'll be there. But I've always tried to build teams that will last over a cycle, which is 3, 4, 5 years. It's just a natural consequence of that. You're looking at a younger demographic, a team that will grow, that will improve, that will adapt to the challenges ahead. So like I said, when I got here, it was a team that, even with a demographic point of view, looked like it was at the end of a cycle. A lot of players who'd had great careers but were either ready to move on or getting to the end of it. So that combination with a different approach for me, it was definitely part of it to go younger. So yeah, then it was time for me to ask this question about the centre-backs. And he kind of was nodding along and going, yep. And I was thinking, okay, he sees it. And he just went, no. As in, because I asked him all of that, and I said, were you tempted to sign another centre-back? And he was like, no. And I don't think we're in the same position as last year. I think Radu is a different proposition for us, essentially saying Eric Dyer wasn't suited. And certainly with Archie coming into the group, and Jed probably not being in the plans initially, but now I think we're in a much different position than we were last year. We've got Ben Davies as well, obviously, who can play at centre-back or at left-back. But again, I mean, that's the discipline of it. Yeah, we can go out and sign another centre-back, but if the right player's not there, I'm not going to do it. It's as simple as that. I'm not, I never have, I never will. For me, it's about getting the right people in, and there wasn't an opportunity for us to bring in someone who I thought was going to add to our group, so we don't do it. We've got Ashley Phillips, we've got young Luka Vuskovic available next year, 2 young centre-backs. I don't want to block their pathway by doing something now. It might look from the outside like we've got another player, but if that player is not going to be suitable to what we're doing and not going to fit in, why would I bring them in and potentially block the path for somebody else? So there's a lot I like in that answer. I would say there's a couple of contradictions. Ashley Phillips doesn't really give an Ashley Phillips a chance. So yeah, I wouldn't have used Ashley Phillips if I was him. I was a bit disappointed also for him not to mention Alfie Dorrington, who is a very talented young defender. Just had a nightmare with hamstring injuries the last probably 6 months or so. But yeah, I got the logic of it. I think I probably understand the aspect of it, essentially just having to be the right player. And if the defender that he wanted, it's also, I know people don't always want to hear this, but it is quite tricky to sign a player who is going to be a 4th choice centre-back. You are probably going to have to sign a younger player who is, sounds ridiculous, but happy to be there. And that's a big thing for Postecoglou as well. He does like players that really want to be at a club, not someone that is like, I'll choose your club over this club because of money or whatever. He wants players who kind of will fight almost to come and play for him and Tottenham. So again, it's very small, this kind of sample size of players that he wants, but we'll come to that in a little bit as well. So yeah, I think I was 75% impressed with his answer and quite liked it, while also the other 25% not being too sure about the Ashley Phillips element, being disappointed that Alfie Dorrington wasn't there, but also still feeling they needed another centre-back at the end of it all. But while also understanding that if he couldn't get the one he wanted, then there's no point compromising for the sake of it. But yeah, look, the thing about the young players as well, there's a slight bit of a misnomer to it in that you could easily see, we spoke about Jack Clark earlier, we could easily look at them and just think, oh, look, it's more kind of punts on potential, maybe young players that could be good. These players are going to be sensational. They are. I cannot speak highly enough about, certainly Archie Gray and Lucas, I'm going to have to pronounce his name right now, Lucas Bergvall, as he said it in his video. I still think he said it Lucius, but enough Swedish people have told me just call him Lucas, so I'm going to stick with that. Lucas Bergvall. And I'm going to call him Bergvall occasionally because it's just routine now. But yeah, it's these two are going to be superstars. Everyone within the club has sensed that already. Coaching staff, Postecoglou loves them both. The senior players think they're just brilliant. Pat Matassar said this week in an interview about Bergvall, he's bound to be one of the world's top players, which says it already. But also Wilson Odobert, there's a huge kind of belief in what he's going to be able to do this season as well and beyond. So yeah, I mean, Postecoglou spoke about them, and I do think that they've come in, especially Bergvall as well, I think, and they've come in and been so good in the training sessions, pre-season friendlies, and just the readiness that they've showed. I do think I think he said it here, to be fair, in his quotes. I think it's slightly tweaked what they've ended up doing in this transfer window, because they're a bit like the blocking the path thing, but even more so that, actually, we don't need... And I'm just speculating, maybe that's a Conor Gallagher. Maybe they've looked at Bergvall and just thought, well, why do we need Conor Gallagher when we've got this absolute superstar in the making, number 8, who's going to be able to contribute this season and play maybe in a similar role? I'm not going to say it's someone like Eze. I mean, Eze, whether he would have ended up playing as a winger or not, Eze is such a strange one because no one ended up going for him. There was a few like that, though, wasn't there? Ivan Toney. Everyone was like, Spurs have to sign him instead of Solanke. He's ended up going to the Saudi Pro League. It's just like, I don't know, a lot of these things that I do find fascinating, that no one went for Eze, no one went for Toney. Gallagher obviously ended up going to Atletico Madrid, but there's kind of no sense, or it certainly seemed from the outside, that Spurs never really contested for that towards the end. Whether the price would have been way more for Spurs and unrealistic anyway for Premier League teams, but I think that was the case. Didn't Villa kind of, was it going to be a much higher price for them? So maybe, but still, I can kind of understand the logic when I see the amount of bodies now that can play in the number 8 roles. I don't think the midfield, you can maybe argue about the number 6 role still being, I know some people wanted another 6, but in my mind, I think Basuma Bentancur and certainly Archie Gray is the long-term number 6. And Cardosa, who knows, that weird kind of deal that could end up being something for the future as well. Because he's not too shabby a number 6 at all. Internacional in the is that where Sandro came from in Brazil? It's a fascinating kind of backstory. He's New Jersey born midfielder to Brazilian parents, grew up in Brazil, played in the Brazilian league, then got taken across to Spain, Real Betis, and has become like a regular starter there. USA international now, tough tackling, intercepting, kind of really strong defensive midfielder, only 22 years old. He could end up being an option if Basuma does not stick to being good Eve and ends up being not so good Eve. We'll see how that goes. But I do feel like the performances of Bergvall and Gray behind the scenes, and I think we'll get to see in games more than kind of even pre-season showed us, I think that tweaked things. And this is what Postecoglou said about them. He said, I'm not surprised in how ready they are as you keep an open mind, but you just don't know. Lucas has been playing in Sweden. Archie played a full season in the Championship, but I've been really impressed with both guys. More the way they've handled things and their maturity. They're 18, but it's the way they've fitted in with the whole group, their ability to take in information and training at a certain level as the training is intense. The capacity to do that from a physical capacity has been really good. It didn't change anything materially in what I wanted to accomplish this transfer window. We may have gone a bit stronger in a different area if both of those guys didn't work out, but it wouldn't have been a major shift from what we have already done. Our main focus this window was around the front third to make sure we bolstered that, and I think we've got some good outcomes. Those two guys just further reinforce the areas we were okay in anyway. So that's what I mean. They're kind of both in a midfield area where there's a lot of bodies already. One of those attacking options, of course, he's talking about, one was Solanke, one is Wilson Odobert. He was very clear on him being someone he wanted from the start. He said Wilson was great last week. I was rapt to get him, which is a great Australian expression, meaning he's delighted. He was one I was really keen on all summer. We had to be patient with him as the Dom Solanke deal went on a bit longer than we thought it would, and we had to get that done first. He did great for us. It was his first game as a 19-year-old, and he was exciting to watch. He will get more and more comfortable with us. I don't mind players coming in early and giving them exposure early as it gets it out the way. You can try to protect them, but when you're at a big club, get them out there and get them an understanding of what the team is like, and he's adapted really well. So yeah, there's big statements in there, kind of explaining why they had to get the Solanke deal done first, but also claiming that he was one he wanted all along, and he was really keen on all summer. So look, everyone's going to have their say on things. Everyone's going to have their say on whether, of course, there was Pedro Neto was heavily linked with Spurs all summer as well. Again, it's one of those maybe, and this is me speculating. Maybe again it comes down to players wanting to be at Tottenham and that being a key thing. Obviously, Pedro Neto is one of Chelsea's 97 wingers now, and good luck to him in that. I don't know if they. Just trying to look if they got the Sancho one through in the end. I know Raheem Sterling's gone in the opposite direction to down the road. But yeah. I mean, look, I absolutely understand any and all frustration in the fan base because of it's a club lacking in silverware. Of course it is. As I've just said at the top of this, it's a club that's been in a mess for the last 5 years, especially in terms of having no real clear direction or understanding of what it wanted to be as a club. I've gone on that loads and loads about that. So I understand that frustration. There's been no silverware. There's been no managers that stick around for very long, or a belief or a backing in them to be a long-term project. There's been no real tangible kind of results on the pitch to be able to look at that. It's all well and good to look at the infrastructure that's been built, the size of the club from what it was, but ultimately football fans want trophies, and that's absolutely understandable, and it's absolutely right that supporters should demand the best from their club and hold them accountable when it's lacking. And that's certainly what I try to do. I know no one's ever going to be entirely happy. Even tonight, like kind of reporting some of the things I was getting in the neck, and I haven't done nothing. It wasn't my fault. I don't sign players. I don't decide on fees or whatever. But I get it. People can be frustrated and angry about stuff, and understandably, it's very, very difficult for a club to start a new project when they've started so many new projects, ask for patience when the fans have been so patient. 100%. All of that is absolutely true. And like I say, I've always said this, a lot of things when people are critical of the club, I understand a lot of the things, and I agree with certainly some of the things. I think the key, obviously, in anything like that is the way it is put it across and comes across. And if it is put in a really constructive, good argument, 100%, that's fantastic. I think it's when people just kind of get unnecessarily angry and aggressive about it all. It's like, okay, you kind of lose people when you do that as well. It's a strange way to go. But among all of that, the one thing I would say is I do kind of, the old, honestly, it's like rolled out with every manager. It's like, the manager's a club puppet, the manager's a yes man, the manager's just a front for whatever the club wants to do and all this sort of stuff. What I would say is Postecoglou's not that man. He's just not. He's not. Having dealt with him for the last year as well, and knowing how, I guess, stubborn in a way. He would say in a good way. He would probably admit he's stubborn as well in terms of his beliefs. I just don't think you can label him as someone who will accept anything other than what he wants that fits his system. He doesn't bend on his principles whatsoever. He's been in coaching 28 years. And if you look across that, just a simple glance across that, he's just got this core belief in what he's doing. That's what his entire coaching career has been built upon. And he looks to ensure that everyone around him buys into what he's selling, not that he buys into what they're doing. Absolutely not. The clubs have to bend to his will, not the other way around. And there's this kind of thought of, he's just happy to be there. He's happy to be in the Premier League. Of course, he's delighted to be a Premier League manager. That's the pinnacle of his thing. But to then do that and abandon all of the principles that got him to that position in the first place, he would be the first to admit would be utterly stupid. It would be the daftest thing to do. So yeah, that's why I just don't buy into any of that. Sure, I'm sure sometimes there will be players that are top or higher up their list that Spurs weren't able to get, and then they would have had to go for other players. Absolutely, that's just the way football clubs work. They work through lists. But you can easily have a top 3 in a list, let's say, and all of those would be absolutely wanted and would be fine for the team. So yeah, just because maybe one of those top 3 wasn't the one they ended up with, you see what I mean? It's like, I think people like to see things in this very black and white way, and football is so grey. It really is. Trust me, some of the weird things you kind of find out behind the scenes and stuff like that, it's definitely not a black and white world at all. But yeah, and look, this transfer window was not the fix for everything he wanted from the club. It did bring a lot of the huge overhaul. I know people kind of want to maybe dismiss slightly the huge amount of outgoings and everything that happened, and I absolutely acknowledge that was fixing a lot of past mistakes as well. There's no kind of, you can't dress it up as this resounding success for the club when you're kind of mopping up a lot of your own errors. Absolutely. But I do think a huge amount has been done in this Postecoglou year or so. It is remarkable when you look at the squad that he inherited when he would have signed up in May last year to the one that he is now going into the rest of this season, or certainly till January with. It's a completely different squad. And he admitted he was asked about the January window. I put those quotes out earlier with loads of other ones. And I think some people took it as like, oh, look, he's already talking about January window, already deflecting and talking about the next one. To be absolutely fair, he was asked. It wasn't me, it was another reporter. It was asked about the January window and whether the work has already started for that. And and he said essentially, I don't know if it was in a quote I said earlier, but that Johan Lang and his Langer and his team are already starting to look towards areas there. I don't know if I've had the quotes there or not, but he said essentially that he can already see kind of little bits and pieces that he wants to move on to in January and try and fix as well. As he said, it's a process. So yeah, I think the key thing from it all is we can all suggest players. There's loads of players I would have loved Spurs to sign this summer, but they've got to be the right pieces for the Postecoglou puzzle. They have to be, because if they're not, you're just going to find them in the corner of the room somewhere discarded under something. They're not going to be in the jigsaw box. Killing these analogies, absolutely destroying them today. He's got very particular beliefs in what he wants, and he pushes Langer and his recruitment team to very much focus their efforts and their data analysis on this certain types of player in each position to fit his system. Because this is a good thing about Postecoglou, I think, for the places he works, is that he takes 100% responsibility for every single signing that comes under his watch, because ultimately he won't say yes unless he is 100% convinced that they will fit into his mentality, his system, and right person as well as the right player. So they've got to really do it, and this is what I mean. This is why I will continue to say this. I don't think we can judge this window yet in a good way or a bad way. I've been doing this a long time now. This was, I think, my 17th transfer deadline day. since starting covering Spurs. And that's, I think, what I've learned by now, is that you can't judge it the day the window closes, because so many windows that have been great or seemed great have ended up being absolutely pants, quite frankly. And sometimes windows that have seemed a little bit slightly more underwhelming, and we've moaned about certain positions not being filled, have then resulted in seasons that were probably some of the best. But yeah, it's just the way it works, isn't it, really? And I don't think you can doubt the talent of what's been assembled this summer, and just how good many of these players can be. But ultimately, yeah, only time's going to be able to tell us whether... I was trying to think of a good name for them. I think it was George Sessions that came up with this one from PA. But like the kind of the Busby Babes, all this sort of stuff. Was it Fergie's Kids? I can't remember what they were called now. Or we've got Ange's Angels. Are they going to be Ange's Angels or Postecoglou's Problems? We'll find out in the kind of months ahead and years ahead. But I'm excited to see what this squad can do. And I do think, other than the centre-back, left-back kind of conundrum, left-sided centre-back thing, I do think there is cover in every position. It's Spurs, so they'll probably have an injury crisis of like 20 players out. But I do think there's depth in most positions. And I think we're going to still have a lot of discussions over not only who's not getting in the team, but who's not even getting in the matchday squad at times. There were some nice little quotes about Will Lancashire. He was asked about Will Lancashire today. And he said, yeah, we've been really happy with Will. Unfortunately, he picked up an injury in that game against Bristol Rovers, but he should be all right after the window. That's why we're keeping him with us. Him and Mikey Moore are the two young players we're going to keep with the first team. And the reason we're going to keep them with the first team is because we feel like they're going to contribute and play. Whether that is Europa League or Carabao Cup or the league, they're part of the first team. And if Richie is out for an extended period of time, then Will definitely be a part of it. Will and Mikey have done well in pre-season, and we feel they'll benefit from being around the first team. He was then asked whether the Europa League experience could be the perfect step for both of them. And he said, well, yeah, if they play and play well, mate. Otherwise, it will not be a pleasant experience. But it's like with all of these things. With young players, it's about performance and actions rather than just experiences. The reason we've kept them with us at the moment is because we feel like them being around the first team environment, we've seen during pre-season they've thrived in that, and that's what we want to continue to do. There is always January for us to reassess if they haven't played enough and whether to send them out on loan. Other players have gone out on loan because we feel like they need more first-team exposure regularly. Both Will and Mikey are part of the first team, and like every other player, they will get an opportunity to contribute, and hopefully they will. I thought that was really good on them. We know about Mikey Moore, but to hear that real positive to be about Will Lancashire as well, who has had a brilliant summer. You know, scored 32 goals for the under-21s last season. Come in, score a couple of goals for the first team in pre-season, knock down Dane Scarlett and Alejo Velez in the pecking order, put yourself as like the top young striker at the club, and then, yeah, Richarlison, fortunately, another little muscle injury. He's going to be out for a couple of weeks or so off. We'll come back after the international break. Will, I think, will come back just after the international break as well. There's potential for him to maybe even be on the bench, you know, for the North London derby. Who knows? It could be. I think that Solanke's going to be fit for that. He could have been at a push, maybe ready for the Newcastle game, but Postecoglou said they just want to err on the side of caution. Just give him another couple of weeks to be ready for like that huge game against Arsenal. And I think that's right, to be honest. I think it is. But yeah, Richarlison, I asked him about Richarlison and just said, like, he's just had no rhythm, has he, to his Tottenham career. And he was like, yeah, that's like been one of the major problems for him, because every time he plays and he gets a run of games, he looks good. And he said, we've been so careful with him this summer. Didn't even start him until like the very final pre-season game where he came on for a couple of minutes. Then only gave him, 20 minutes or so against Everton. And he still, in training, pulls up with a muscle injury, or feels a bit sore with a muscle injury. And this is really why I think Spurs would have been absolutely fine taking a bid for him from the Saudi Pro League in the summer, because while seems a good guy and a very effective player when he plays regularly, he's just not available for the club enough. Just as simple as that. So yeah, we could see. Who knows? I've always said this before with Marcus Rashford. He got his chance because of injuries in, I think it was maybe even a Europa League game for Man United. If Will, with his ability, gets a chance because Richarlison misses another chunk of games and he comes in and does what Will Lancashire does, which is score goals. Who knows the way this season could go for him? It could be a completely different season than we kind of expected happening. He could emerge as a bit of a star. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Like I said, very early days and he's very young, but he's certainly, I think he will get his chances this season, and Postecoglou seems to say that as well. The other thing I asked him about centre-backs, asked him about Richarlison. I was going to say Will, it wasn't, it was Richarlison. And then I asked him about, hypothetically, what would happen if Lo Celso and Reguilon didn't go? Would they be integrated back into the team? Obviously, Lo Celso has, Reguilon hasn't as of yet. He was very strong on that as well. Essentially, paraphrasing him massively, said they know what their place is in the squad or not in the squad, and what they choose will not affect the first team squad. So pretty much, you don't go, you're not in the first team squad. I mean, first off, they wouldn't be able to be registered in Europe anyway, but they're not going to be in those match day squads. I think there would be room. I'm trying to remember now. I think there was one space in the foreign player squad for the slots for the Premier League, so you could maybe register Reguilon. But the way he was talking, it was almost as if he, although he registered Lloris, so he maybe would just in case there was an absolute emergency. But yeah, it was quite clear really in what their kind of future holds. So so that's all of that. What else we had? George Abbott's gone to Notts County. Reported that early in the week, and that has now happened. Josh Keeley reported he was getting a new contract at Hinterley in Orient, which has now happened as well. That's a great move for him. I think he'll get minutes as well, from what I hear from people around Orient, which is the be-all and end-all of these loans, really. Luca Gunter, another young, very good young keeper. He's also got a new contract as well. He's one that they've got a lot of hope for, so that's cool for him. We've also had the Europa League draw. We don't know until tomorrow, technically today, for me and you watching this, exactly when these dates will be, but we know Spurs will go to Rangers. They will go to Ferencváros, which is in Budapest, if I remember correctly. They will go to Galatasaray. That's going to be an interesting one in Istanbul. And they'll go to Hoffenheim. And the home games will be against Roma, AZ Alkmaar, Troy Parrott reunion already, Karabag and Elfsborg. So I quite like that group. I think it's quite a good one. I think it's got some challenges in it, but it's also got some really interesting away trips for those that do the European trips, and yeah, some nice little narratives in there as well, with Ange going back to Glasgow to the rivals of the team he managed, and no doubt getting a warm reception. And yeah, the Troy Parrott connections as well, and yeah, there's many more narratives that I'm sure we can get. Of course, Big Davinson Sanchez at Galatasaray. So yeah, there's plenty going on there as well. Oh, Jadon Sancho did go to Chelsea. It's just been confirmed here at it's 2:04 a.m. I'm recording this. Man, I really need to get to sleep because I'm supposed to be up early in the morning as well. Right, yeah, this was just meant to be a shorter kind of window wrap, as it were. So yeah, I know it's probably not the answer that maybe people were looking for, but yeah, Spurs transfer window. I'm not going to give it a mark like I normally have in the past, because I'm just, yeah, never get it right when it comes to the transfer windows, in terms of, I don't think a lot of what we kind of, it's difficult, it's Spurs, isn't it? So some of the players that we thought were going to be massive successes have ended up not being that. Some of the players that maybe have become a little bit like unexpectedly fantastic, but like even Van der Ven, you know, a lot of people saw him as the not Tapsoba, the cheaper version, and he's ended up being one of the best young defenders in the Premier League. But who knows? Some of them might have a redemption story, like Jed Spence. That'd be great this season. Great to see that he is part of the squad. You know, that's all now done and confirmed. Like we kind of said a few weeks back, that was going to be the case, and it is. But yeah, so I'm going to give this one a bit of time before I judge it. Probably, you kind of look back, I suppose, November, December time, see how it deals with injuries that have happened, see how these young players have coped with it, because we could end up looking back on the summer of 2024 and thinking what a legendary transfer window it was. We could, or we could look back on it and say what a horrendous transfer window it was. But my feeling is that we're going to look back on 2024 as the summer that they bought the likes of Archie Gray, Lucas Berrival, and Wilson Odobert, and Dominic Solanke, who I still think is going to hit more than 20 goals for Spurs this season, maybe even 20 Premier League goals for Spurs this season. I think he's going to fit the system like a glove. God, you know it's late when I'm doing Ace Ventura stuff. But there you go. Right, I've got to head off because I'm literally keeling over and starting to fall asleep now, as I'm sure many of you are watching this. Heading off to Newcastle today as well because of the train strike and the madness that will cause with the trains. I've got to head up there the night before because there were no trains that would have got me up there in time. So doing Newcastle, probably try and do another video on Monday to have a chat about that, and we'll go into some of the other stuff in a bit more detail. And again, apologies if my slightly hushed voice on this one is, I know sometimes there seems to be a real kind of spectrum of people that have absolutely no issues with the sound quality, and some people have real issues with it being quite quiet. So those people are going to really struggle. I'm sorry, but there is a reason behind it this time. Right, I've got to head off and I've got to upload this, which is going to be a process in itself. But yeah, let me know in the comments underneath what you feel about the transfer window. I'm sure there'll be a lot of strong opinions. I'm sure there will be some people that can kind of see something that's being built, some people that can see some of the holes that I see in it as well, some people that will want more experience like I would have wanted, but some people that will have understand what Postecoglou talks about. I thought it was quite important that he came out today and then really gave a very clear view on how it was the transfer window he kind of wanted. I'm sure he would have wanted more. Mourinho once told, I think it was me or someone in a press conference, that managers will always want more from a transfer window. No manager is ever 100% happy about a transfer window. Never. And yeah, that's football. We all want more and we're all greedy, and that's no bad thing about our football club, I don't think. But yeah, we'll see. Very young, exciting team. The last time Spurs had a very young, exciting team was under Pochettino, and they weren't too bad. And hopefully Postecoglou can do that and then take them on to the next level. That would be the dream. There you go. Right, time to head off. Yeah, let's see what the trip to St James's Park brings. Hopefully far better than the last two, because they were absolutely rubbish. Yeah, please be a good one, because you can just imagine if it's a bad one, everything about the transfer window is going to be just exacerbated and turned into an even bigger thing. Whereas if it's a successful one, you can just kind of keep some of the momentum going from the Everton game. But, you know, it's Tottenham. Tottenham will do what Tottenham do. Time to head off. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.